I'm Lee Cohen, and I've been working in music for 25 years. I started working in record stores when I was 15, and it progressed. I toured in my 20s, and then eventually developed to be a manager. I managed a band called the Dandy Warhols for 8 years. And at the end of 8 years, I got really, really burnt out. A lot of things had changed in the industry, and everything I felt I was bringing to the table was facing too many variables that were outside of my control. So I decided to take a break, and I went and got a master's, and I thought, that's gonna change everything. I don't have to work in music anymore. But the reality is, I'm stuck in music. I've been doing this for 25 years. I love what I do. I love working with musicians, and I couldn't escape coming back to it. But in the 2 years that I left, everything's completely changed, even more so than when I was there last time. So I've decided to take a fresh approach to the work and kind of start over. Digital's taken over. The ones and zeros. And when we're talking about ones and zeros, for me and my artist, it has to do a lot with streaming. And I'm not gonna totally focus on streaming, and I'm not gonna talk negatively about streaming. I'm gonna talk about sustainability and what that means. And then I'm gonna reframe the conversation, which does tend to focus on streaming, and it tends to focus on the negative. And then I'm gonna talk about strategies and how to create strategies and new business models so that we can all sort of coexist in a new economy. This is a really dry definition of sustainability, just something I pull off the internet. To me, sustainability is really about creating something now that doesn't impede on future generations working in the same industry. So I have to ask, is the music industry sustainable? And really it's about context. Who are you and what do you do within the industry, and what is your business model, and where do you earn? So there's a couple different perspectives. These are not all of the perspectives, but there's record labels, there's artists, and then there's technology. If we look at record labels, and we look at how they earn money, they make money off of sales. And it's been that way for a long, long time. To make those sales, they pick a bunch of artists, put them out there in the world, spend a lot of money doing that. If one of them is successful, they make a bunch of money. Artists, it's a little different. You've got multiple points of revenue earning. It's not just sales, it's also touring, it's also publishing, it's also performance royalties, and it's also merchandising. And you can't really single these out, they're all interconnected. Then when we look at tech, and we're talking here using streaming as an example, advertising and subscription, that's how they make their money. But they also make money from venture capital investment and the eventual IPO of the company. So taking into account everyone's different perspective, is the music industry sustainable? Of course it's not. If you rely on sales and you're a record label, you used to capture all the revenue up front in a single purchase. Back in the 90s, a CD cost $18. That's a big lump sum paid to the label, in part after distributors, after the record stores. But that doesn't really exist anymore, because streaming is here, it's growing, and it's not gonna go away. You can also say that of course it's sustainable. There's a lot of money in music. If there wasn't a lot of money, tech wouldn't be here. But the real answer is I don't know. Everything is new. The models of earning that exist with tech coming in and creating new ventures, that's all brand new, and we're not gonna know for some time whether it works. I mean, if you think about companies like Spotify, they're losing money, and it's expected to earn money at a certain point, but that's not guaranteed, and a competitor could come in and take over the earnings and with a different model. And so everything's really changing, and there's no real 100% answer that I can give you to say that it is sustainable. But I do know this. We need to adapt. Whether you're a record label, an artist, or a tech company, we're all working in the same proximity. And to be sustainable, we all rely on one another. I think a really good example of a company that's adapted is IBM. IBM used to produce laptops, and they were a competitor of Apple. Does anyone know what IBM does anymore? They produce mainframe computers, and they do a lot of consulting, and there's a whole other element to their business, but they don't produce computers anymore. So what I'm trying to say is that the technology companies that exist today within music might change what they do as we go forward. That's something we can apply back to music. As artists, we need to change the way that we do business to exist in a new economy. Same with labels. To do that, we need to reframe the conversation. This is sort of a typical example of an artist speaking about streaming, and it's really, really negative. And it's really, really redundant. This was like last week, but the same week there was probably 2 or 3 other artists speaking out against streaming. And the reason is, well, they vilify it. There's this number, and this number is not exactly accurate, but it's sort of a base number for what one single stream would pay as a lump sum to the sort of network that an artist has, so the label, the distributor, and then that's broken down. To understand streaming a little better and reframe the conversation and not be so negative, you have to make sense of the money. And this is the kind of math-based portion, and I'm gonna breeze through it because it's a little bit much maybe for this early in the morning. But at the end, I think you'll understand that I'm just trying to do a comparison and make a point. So the income from one stream, after all the reductions for the partners and your mechanicals, is pretty darn small, 0.0029 cents, based on that 0.0084. Now, if you looked at the same formula of distribution applied to a download for a single, it's 23 cents. So if we're comparing how many streams it takes to equal one purchase, it's 79. If a stream happens 7,900 times at the stream to purchase ratio, it would suggest that 100 people listen to that song. But is it 100 listeners? Or is it 500? We don't really know that information, and that's kind of what is missed always in the conversation that the artists bring up when they're talking negatively about streaming, is that they're just looking at the tiny price point. They're not looking at how much more there is to what's going on. If that 7,900 streams were listened to by 500 people, it's more like 15.8 listens each, or 15 or 16 listens. And to me, that seems a little bit more reasonable. I mean, how many times have you guys listened to a song 80 times? You know, probably not that often, and not all of them. So which holds more value, 100 listeners or 500 listeners? And again, we have to think about this in context. If you're the label and you're based on sales, and you've got an initial output of money to produce everything, you want to see that money back immediately. So 100 purchases of a full download is going to get you more income immediately. If you have to rely on that same income coming over time, it's not as worthwhile of a venture for you. So to me, the correct answer is 500. But then again, I work for artists. And artists' business models are not solely dependent on sales. So talking about the heart of the matter, the value of a fan is worth a lot more than the meager income from the streaming rates in the short term. The value is compounding. When we have 500 listens, or 500 listeners rather, you have the opportunity to turn them into fans. And when you do that, you've got continued streaming, so those 500 people are listening again. They're also going to be converted into physical purchases. That's becoming more and more evident. People are using streaming to try things on, and when they're converted as fans, they want the vinyl. They want, the limited edition cassette. They want physical things. They're also going to come see your shows and buy other types of merchandise, stickers, badges, whatever. And you're also going to earn from other streams, performance royalties and publishing. So assuming it's 500, what do you know about those 500 people? And how do you convert them into longtime fans? When artists are complaining about the streaming rate, they're not really seeing analytics. And they're not understanding all the information behind the 500. Where are those 500 people? 500 is more valuable, especially if all those 500 exist in St. Louis, and there's a festival you can get on in St. Louis, and that festival is going to pay you $50,000 to perform. So let's move the conversation a little bit forward and talk about the benefits of technology. What are the benefits? Reduce barriers to entry, increased revenue streams, amplified word of mouth, reduced recording costs, and shortened turnarounds for producing those recordings. So, distribution. Distribution's always been a barrier to entry. With physical distribution, you had to get the space in a store. Well, with the digital world, the space is infinite. And platforms like TuneCore and Bandcamp allow artists to work more directly and have more access to direct revenue streams for sales or streaming. And then, as a result, you're going to have increased revenue streams from performance royalties. So, something that's vilified is Rhapsody's meager pay per stream for their passive platform. The thing is, this didn't exist before. So, with technology, we have an additional revenue stream. It's not replacing, it's in addition to. It's another way for people to access your music. That pays back, particularly in America, through sound exchange. So there's a royalty that's paid. Technology's enabled extra income for the artist. Audium is another example of technology enabling artists and labels to capture revenue. It basically uses fingerprinting technology to find your songs on YouTube and make sure that you're getting paid properly for their use. The benefits of amplified word of mouth. Social media. Obviously, it's a lot easier for you to connect with fans now than it was 20 years ago. When I was 15 years old and I wanted to talk to a band that I really liked, I wrote them a letter, and 3 months later, I might get a postcard. So, beyond streaming, technology has also produced tools which artists can use to reduce their costs and shorten turnarounds. So, things like GarageBand and Logic are tools that artists can use while on a tour bus, on tour. They're no longer limited to having to be in a studio or having to take the time off after touring to stop, write, figure out how to pay for, get into a studio, and produce the results that would essentially keep them earning from all those other revenue streams. Everything's tightened up now. And I'm going to reference Alex from Franz Ferdinand, who's talking about Logic and how he used Logic and even GarageBand on planes when he was traveling, and how parts of those demos essentially made it into the final recordings. And if he didn't have that time, it's feasible that the record would have taken that much longer to produce. And in that time, so much might have changed that their audience might have disappeared. So really what you're doing is you're keeping consistent with the market. Which leads me to talk about strategies. And I'm going to bring up Elvis Costello real quick. He wasn't particularly talking about strategy. Recent interview with him, and he's talking about the way his father listened to music and how he couldn't write after his father passed away because he would bring the LP over and he would watch his father interact in a real specific way with the music. And the reality is that all of us probably interact with music differently. There's no ubiquity in the way that we consume music. So the strategy for creating strategies has to be different. looking back at context, if you're a label, you've got your interests, you know who you rely on, so we need to create strategies to benefit your own success. So you want to ask yourself, let's say you're an artist, where are you at? And where do you want to be? Then, what resources are available to make things happen for yourself? What can you do on your own, and what can you not do to make things happen? Then what's missing? To actualize your strategy, you want to plan around what's missing. But be realistic. If your goal is to be famous, I don't know that that's very realistic. It's probably a 1 in a million chance. But if your goal is to increase the amount of time that you spend on the road, I'm sure that you can go back, figure out what's missing, figure out who you need to connect with, work with them to plan, and move on with your career. So where does that leave us? In the end, you just need to be really, really good. Part of the democratization of music, which has opened up all of these platforms and all of distribution and all the ears of the entire world to listen to artists, it's enabled artists of the smallest and maybe not the most talented degrees to say, I deserve a career in music. And the reality is, that's not true. You just have to be really, really good. And sometimes it gets missed. Of course it gets missed. But, I'm quoting Werner Herzog here as a filmmaker, he's not even in music. But I think it's relevant. If you're really, really good, people are going to line up, and they're going to want to work with you. And I'm going to end with this one, William S. Burroughs. If you're in music because you want to get rich, specifically, I don't know that I understand you, and I don't know that you're going to be successful. It really relies on you producing good work. And on the back of that, saying that the price an artist pays for doing what he wants to do is that he has to do it. Artists are compelled to do the work, and I am equally compelled to follow up on that work and make sure that it continues to exist. I'm not here because, I'd like to get paid more, but the reality is I just love music and I love seeing it happen. And for my position and for me to be successful, the artists need to be successful. And I guess that's the end. Any questions? Nothing? I have a question. Is that realistic? Does everyone sort of complain about how crappy the royalty rates are? Or am I just sensitive to it? Does everyone hear this quite often? All right. Did I help to make a little sense that that's not really that bad, considering what you can gain now on the back of it? I'll take that as a maybe. Okay. Thank you.